My name is Sean Hocuff. I'm one of the pilots with the Minnesota wing of the Commemorative Air Force. We're here today in Bemidji, Minnesota with 3 aircraft. The one behind me is a North American B-25 Mitchell, and it's one of 6 aircraft that we have at the Commemorative Air Force hangar in South St. Paul Fleming Field in the Twin Cities. We have the aircraft here in Bemidji as part of the CAF's mission to show these aircraft to the public and keep them flying. So we'll be flying them, giving rides here today, and giving tours through the aircraft throughout the day.
Where did the airplane come from?
So this B-25 Mitchell was made by North American at Wichita, Kansas. North American was headquartered out in California, where their main factory was. They also had factories in Dallas, Texas, and Wichita, Kansas, where this aircraft was built in 1945. It was first assigned to Palm Springs, California Air Force Base, and then it spent a lot of years in Texas for the Air Force. It's a late model B-25, so it was originally built as a navigation trainer, so it was designed to train navigators for the Air Force. The aircraft then went to a private owner, was in Wisconsin, and in the late 70s it was acquired by the CAF. The aircraft was bought by the private owner from the government for about $2,500. The CAF unit got the aircraft in about 1980, and that's when an extensive 12-year restoration began on the aircraft. The aircraft was restored by volunteers, all volunteers of the Commemorative Air Force, and first flew in 1992. And ever since that time, it's been very active on the air show circuit in the summertime. It flies all throughout the country at air shows. So it's a regular appearing airplane at a lot of air shows.
Okay, I'm looking at what caliber gun here.
So that's a 50 caliber Browning machine gun, one in each side, 2 waist guns, and we're looking at the rear compartment of the B-25 where the waist gunners would be at, and then behind us is the tail gunner, and he has twin 50 out the tail, and we're looking forward at the rear part of the bomb bay. There's a foot high crawlway on top, so you can actually crawl on top of the bomb bay up into the cockpit in the front. So you're looking at the tail there, tail gunner position, and that's a twin 50 tail stinger facing rear, and so that's the tail gunner compartment. Yeah, so we're looking at the bomb bay here, and we have some 100-pound bombs in the bomb bay, and the aircraft could hold a couple thousand pounds of bombs. So depending on the mission or what it called for, they could either take 20 100-pound bombs, or 400 or 500-pound bombs, or even a couple 1,000-pound bombs. And they were in the bomb bay. At the top of the bomb bay, you can see a hatch there, that if the bombardier needed to check the bomb bay for any bombs that had hung up or had not dropped out, he could look in the bomb bay. That was the only way to see in the bomb bay during flight. The top of the bomb bay is about a foot from the top of the fuselage, so there's a crawlway to go in between the 2 compartments. These pieces here are called bomb racks, and they hold the bombs, and then the bombs have a lug on them, and between the lug and the rack they had what was called a shackle, and all that was a piece of metal with 2 electric solenoids in it, and they hooked into the hooks here on one side, and then the solenoids had pins that would hook onto the bombs, so that when the bombardier hit the pickle button, it would electrically open those solenoids and drop the bombs.
What do they call the pickle button?
Pickle button is the trigger.
Where did it get its name?
It looked like a pickle. It was a cord with a little small round handle with a red button on the end, and that's how they drop the bombs. Right here you're looking at hydraulic lines for landing gear and flaps and cowl flaps. And then right here you're looking at fuel line going from wing tanks for cross feed. There's a cross feed line, and then going to each engine on each side. Okay, so you're looking forward right there That's the crawlway that goes underneath the pilot and co-pilot seats forward to the glass house up front, and that's where the Bombardier did his thing up front of the aircraft. Coming up top here is pilot and co-pilot seat. Alright, we're looking at the cockpit here of the North American B-25 Mitchell. Yokes for captain and co-pilot. Throttles, 2 of them, 1 for each engine. Propeller control to set the RPM of the engine. Mixture. Right here are the magnetos for each engine. And starter switches. This has a inertial starter. So when you start the engine, you bring the power on and you turn on the motor, which turns a flywheel. Once that flywheel gets up to RPM, then you engage that flywheel. Propellers turn, you go through about 9 revolutions, and then you bring on your magneto. Then once you get the engine fire, you bring on the primer to feed the engine initially, and then you bring your mixture forward, and then propellers up to get the RPM right around 900 RPM. And as you can see, 2 sets of instruments: airspeed, altimeter, compass, artificial horizon, 2 navigation gauges there. So again, you've got manifold pressure for engine number 1, number 2, RPM of the propellers for number 1, number 2, turn and bank, vertical speed, altimeter, compass, artificial horizon, airspeed. We take off around 130, 145, cruise around 200, just under 200. The airplane will go 330, 340 miles an hour, but we never fly it that fast. Again, middle console here. These buttons are to feather the propellers in the event of an engine failure. Press those buttons and it takes hydraulic pressure out of the prop hubs and streamlines the propellers. That's feathering the propellers. We've got modern instruments in here now. We've got 2 GPS units, makes it easier to navigate, and another set of instruments for the second in command. Down here we've got cowl flap controls. The landing gear control is actually under here. It's under this cover. We have that covered up for air shows. The handle is down near the floor. The aircraft has a supercharger. We never use it. It's not needed. We hardly ever fly the airplane above 10,000 feet.
It's a history lesson with wings. The Minnesota Wings Commemorative Air Force travels around the nation during the summer, taking people for rides in the B-25 Mitchell World War II bomber.
What really made the airplane famous was the Tokyo Raiders that early in World War II made the first strike on Japan shortly after Pearl Harbor.
There are only a handful of B-25s left in the world, and one of them flew into Bemidji this week.
Show people the vehicles that the Greatest Generation used to fight the war and how difficult it was compared to today's military.
And just as few and far between as the aircraft is the number of pilots who can fly the B-25.
The Warbird pilots are a very small group,
making this an opportunity that is once in a lifetime.
You don't usually get to get up close and touch history.
This will be the first B-25 ride ever, for sure.
World War II history buff Dan Rantham has been fascinated with the B-25 since he was a boy.
I'm excited. I want to get out and get up, and I'm really looking forward to it.
A Navy pilot from 1955 to 1959, James McGehee has made it a hobby, flying in old warplanes.
Every opportunity I take it, and I fly one of them. And I've never flown the Mitchell, so I'm anxious to fly it.
After getting a tour of the outside of the plane, we finally got to step inside the historic aircraft.
Ready? Yep, ready to go.
Now that we're all set and ready to go, everyone has to wear these headsets here because it gets up to 190 decibels, which is basically the equivalent of a rifle shot for 12 seconds straight.
And as the plane propellers started to spin, our excitement skyrocketed.
Think of the history behind the B-25. A lot of history.
2 passengers and I sat in the front of the plane with the pilots. With passengers in the back, the B-25 can hold up to about 8 people, but not comfortably. It's extremely hot and very confined.
It's interesting. It's definitely a functional airplane. It's not an airliner.
And even more compact is the gunship nose, which in this model is all glass. So the view was well worth the squeeze. While an exhilarating experience for us, we realized firsthand how difficult it must have been for the pilots.
To fly for hours in a confined space like that, those guys really got to work out. You just really appreciate what they did.
So the sky's the limit when it comes to learning. And after only 20 minutes in this World War II aircraft, this is one history lesson learned on the fly that won't be forgotten. For this week's In Focus, Jamil Doneth, Lakeland News.
Okay, my name's Wally Gray, and I'm from Grand Prairie, Texas, and I'm up here in Minnesota this summer. We're selling rides in the 1941 Boeing Stearman behind me, and we're here in Bemidji for this event with the Ford Tri-Motor, the B-25, the BT-13, and the PT-22. And we're happy to be here, and it's a beautiful day, and this is a very nice event, and hope that everybody comes out today. And the airplane behind me is my aircraft that I've owned about 15 years, and it's a Boeing Stearman built in 1941, and there are approximately 10,000 of them built. And they were used by both the Army and Navy as trainers during World War II. And there's approximately 1,000 of them left now. This particular model was, I believe, originally a Navy airplane, but it's in Army colors now. And it cruises at about 90 miles an hour, carries 2 people, the pilot and basically the pilot and a student pilot, or 2 pilots. And it has a 220 horsepower Continental engine. It develops its 220 horsepower at 2,075 RPM. I'm up here visiting friends and family from Texas, and I came from Grand Prairie, Texas. It took me 2 days to get here in it, approximately 15.5 hours flying time. And we're based at Park Rapids, Minnesota. We've been there for about a month, and we decided to come up here. We were invited to come up here for this event this morning, and we'll probably be back for the next day or 2 to participate in it.
I'm George Calesi. I'm the chief in charge of restoration and maintenance. This is a WC-21 Dodge Power Wagon that we have restored from the frame. We had a frame off restoration. We've done all the body work, All the mechanicals I've done, motor, transmission, differential, brakes, every bearing, electrical system, and all the gauges, and it runs like a fine watch, and it's just like it is brand new. But we restored it in such a way that all the work done on it looks as if it was done in the field, like it would have been done during World War II. So I think this is a more accurate representation of the vehicle than one of the pristine restored ones that are a perfect straight panel and aren't a representation of a battle style vehicle. We went to great lengths to find the correct colors for the paint, the decals, the nomenclature on the hood is the way it was shipped from the factory with that off flat blue. We've completely restored the WC-21. We've had a member remake all the canvas. Our seats are all rebuilt and very comfortable. We have a map table that we yet to have to paint, but everything in this vehicle works.
What's a map table?
Underneath the glove box, you'll see a wood panel there, and they would pull that out and they would lay their map on during the their route. Okay. And they would store a 50 cal in the back here. We don't have the storage mechanism for it yet, but that's what would be stored back there. And some were equipped with guns in the back, and this one would primarily be carrying boxes and weapons and K-rations crates, and it could be equipped with seats to carry troops, but this primarily carried bombs and grenades and you name it to the front. And this was used more in this configuration, was more of a stateside vehicle, because they used these, the British used these, and these were used in the African campaign also.
Where'd the truck come from initially? Remember?
This was the 549th, I believe, was the truck. Don't quote me on that.
Did it come out of Minnesota? Where'd you find it?
This came out of the desert someplace. And we had Midwest Military. He's out of Shakopee, I think it is. And we swapped a 1948 Jeep and trailer for the beginnings of this. And then we worked it over. And it was a lot of work. I mean, a lot of the stuff wasn't straight. A lot of it was missing. There were big holes everywhere that we've had to fill and plate. The hardest parts of it were making it look this good.
Hi, I'm Bob Cole. I'm a member of the Minnesota CAF, and this is an L5. Stinson L5 is based on a Stinson 108. It's got a 190 horsepower engine, as I recall, a Lycoming. As you can see, a wooden prop, non-pitch, no way you can change the pitch. High wing, it's obviously a 2-passenger. They did make this in a variant that had an opening, a door on the side of the fuselage that they used for transporting wounded, and basically a flying ambulance. They also use it for artillery spotting. They'd give generals rides in it if you wanted to go look over the battlefront. There was a very similar plane to this in the Battle of the Bulge that Henry Fonda was in. They were flying around that, but I believe that was an L4 if I remember correctly.
What's the difference between L4 and L5?
Different company. Different company. This one is made, as they say, by the Stinson company. The L4 I think was a Cessna, but I don't remember for sure on that one. But it's basically a short field aircraft, lands on just about any surface there is. As you can see, fixed landing gear, no retractable gear, high wing with the struts on it to hold it together, making sure the wings don't fall off.
How'd you guys come across the airplane?
This one actually was donated to us by a doctor from Rice Lake, Wisconsin. He's also the man that donated the B-25 to us. They came as a package deal, I believe. I was just talking with Jim, our executive officer. The Air National Guard apparently restored this airplane and another sister plane just like it. That one is hanging in the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, in their new building. If you ever get to the Air Force Museum, look up at the ceiling. There's an L5 up there. But it's been in our wing for longer than I have. I've been a 13-year member, so this has been a lot longer than that. I have no idea when it first came to us, but it's been a good airplane. Interesting thing about this airplane, we had our spring dance last year, and we had this big windstorm that came through. This plane was out on display along with others, and we had a gentleman that had a T6 dressed up like a Zero. You've probably seen some of those. He had that there. The wind blew the tail around this when we put a hole in the guy's aileron, so we painted a Japanese flag on the side because it had a kill.
Good story.
It's not a bad one, but it is kind of humorous. If you want to get around the other side, you can actually have a picture of the Japanese flag. One of them, they painted, one of our wing members' niece painted on there. Did a nice job, but it's probably the only L5 with a Zero kill.
Hi, I'm John Maxfield, and this is EAA's Ford Tri-Motor, built in August of 1929 in Dearborn, Michigan. We're touring the country with it to bring antique aviation to the general public. Rides are available here at the Bemidji Airport through the 3rd.
We've got 3 airplanes. What kind of horsepower are we talking about?
So, the Ford Tri-Motor is powered by 3 Pratt & Whitney 985 engines. Each is 450 horsepower. It flies the airplane along typically at 80 miles an hour for our rides around Bemidji. We'll be about 1,000 feet above the ground. You'll be experiencing aviation just like it did back in 1929 at the start of the airline business. This very airplane started Eastern Air Transport, which later grew into Eastern Airlines. It then moved on and started Cubana Airlines in Cuba before it moved to the Dominican Republic and served as their Air Force One.
Air Force One, Dominican Republic. That's interesting.
Yes.
How did the EAA get his hands on it?
In the mid-70s, this airplane was in Burlington, Wisconsin, and a severe windstorm blew the airplane over on its back, breaking it into several pieces. The EAA bought it from the insurance company, and over 12 or 15 years and thousands of hours of volunteer help restored it to the condition you see today. Since then, we've been touring the country, giving rides and sharing it with everyone in America.
What'd you do, change airlines?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Talk to the souls at each other, wave to farmers.
Yeah.
Look
for bears.
Smell most of what you flew over.
That was the first thing I was looking at. They're pretty dry. We got a couple inches in the center.
So again, we never start the airplane without a fire gun. Before we even start the start sequence, we want to make sure the step is gone, there's no feet underneath, the area is clear, chocks are removed. Once that's all ready to go, pilot listens for a slam on the door, knows he's pretty close, looks, sees his step, peripheral vision, walking away, things like that, and gets the okay from the starter.
What's your okay?
Who is positioned out here at the wingtip so that he can see the pilot's eyes. Okay?
Able to see right there.
Yep. So, ready to start. The pilot will go to start. Okay? And what we really want to see is a point and a turn. Okay? Any other signal, it could be a lot of different things. So a point and a turn, a cut if one's running and we need to cut it. Start the center engine. These engines start real well. They're not prone to carburetor fires or anything. If we're looking for a fire, it'll be at the bottom of the engine by the air cleaner. And there's no air cleaner, but the round thing at the bottom of this engine. And the signal for fire is either this. Okay, this is international. And if we see a fire, plant our feet. We're not going anywhere. But signal to the pilot.
You want to point at where the fire is?
Yeah, we have this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he needs to know because they're going to evacuate the plane.
Well, we're going to continue cranking the engine to try and suck it up. If we can't do that, at some point, the captain will shut down what engines are running if there are, and say, okay, we'll evacuate.
So you keep the fire sign going as long as there's a fire, basically, and then you'll make the decision to cut the engine.
When it sucks up in, just we're still good.
Ready to roll.
Yeah, we're good there. Okay. So I can watch hand signals and know what's going on. We always start the center engine first. 2 reasons: it's got the generator on it, and it keeps the pilots cool. Basically, that's our air conditioning. That's all we got. Yeah. So we always start the center one, and then the left engine. Once they're both running, and once each of them starts to run, and the pilot's happy with it, just maybe a nod. Okay, a point to the other one. Okay, we're going to go to this one. We'll start this. Okay, it's running. Then we're going to take the fire extinguisher, and we're going to rock this way out of our area of no transgression. Now sometimes we'll fly 2 captains in the airplane, sometimes we'll have press, sometimes a volunteer, a rider, sell the right seat. Whatever the guy in the right seat's saying, we're not going to pay attention to. It's the guy on the left. Yeah. So we have to look across the airplane and pay attention to that person saying signals. And then once the third engine is running, and everything is safe, the area is clear, we're going to release the airplane to the captain by absolute. That's the only signal we're going to give. That's the only signal the captain is trained to respond to. Waves, thumbs up, okay, none of that stuff.
Now, with that Cessna coming in, yep, you'd want to.
You might give a look there. Okay, I see it. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question. That's perfect.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yep.
You being eyes.
Yep. So then the starter can go from here with all three engines successfully running and go join the step ticket marker.
You don't need to be Laro.
No. The EAA is the Experimental Aircraft Association, based in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Started in 1953, initially by people who wanted to build their own airplanes, but it's grown in popularity to the point that it includes anyone interested in aviation. The EAA's mission is to include people in aviation and grow aviation through education, outreach programs, and tours like the Ford Trimotor and B-17.
Again, this is our 1929 Ford Trimotor built in Dearborn, Michigan. It's serial number 69 of 199 that were built between 1927 and 1932. This, as far as we're concerned, is the airplane that started the modern day airline industry. Henry Ford sold the airplane on safety and reliability. All metal construction versus fabric and wood, back in the 20s. 3 engines instead of 1, 2 pilots. He was a firm believer in air travel, and to make a profit. He thought he could do both, promote aviation and make some money, and he did it with the Ford Trimotor.
And don't forget comfort.
And comfort, yes.
This airplane is fully enclosed. Prior to that, the pilots sat out in the wind. The passengers would sit out in the wind in the early biplanes.
Absolutely.
This airplane came with a lavatory and with a flight attendant, as we know it, a stewardess at the time, that would serve meals, and they were registered nurses, and that's what started the airline business.
So this aircraft was revolutionary at its time.
This aircraft was very revolutionary.
Again, it started the modern day airline industry. It wasn't long-lived as the first line airliner. It served its purpose to get the industry going. It operated out of, for the most part, farmers' fields. It had excellent capabilities for doing that, but hauling people in a reliable fashion. Shortly after the Ford was introduced, other airplanes came along that now required runways, but were bigger, faster, a little bit more comfortable, like primarily the Douglas DC-3. But this is the airplane that started it all.
And Henry Ford also started infrastructure for the airlines, such as paved runways, airport hotels that still exist in Dearborn, Michigan at the original Ford Airport. The Dearborn Inn, operated today by the Marriott Corporation, was one of the first airport hotels. Right. Well, as Doug mentioned, it started Eastern Air Transport, which grew into Eastern Airlines, and from there went to Cuba to start Cubana Airlines. From there, the airplane traveled to the Dominican Republic, where it served for their chief executive. It was Air Force One for the Dominican Republic, if you will. And from then it came back to the U.S.
Came back to the U.S., was used for crop dusting and smoke jumping. That's probably one of the more interesting roles it played. It took, just like today, skydivers, took them out into the fires, so they could battle it. And one of the unusual parts about this airplane, if you go around to the side, you notice that the door is square on the bottom. All the other Ford Trimotors are round at the top and round on the bottom, taking from the nautical history and the nautical heritage, like a boat hatch. This one, they especially modified to have a square bottom to aid in the smoke jumpers getting out. And we're the only ones that they have that from Johnson Flying Service. After at stint there, it was used for what we're doing today, barnstorming, going from town to town, letting people experience what it was like to fly an airplane in 1929, 1930.
As well as being a movie star.
A movie star, yes. It's got 2 films to its credit now. The Family Jewels with Jerry Lewis.
And more recently, Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp in Public Enemy. That was filmed in, portions of it were filmed in Oshkosh, and it was just kind of neat having him around and, being around the airplane.
Because it takes off and lands in short distances, after the fire's out, this airplane could go into short mountain airstrips and bring the fire jumpers back out.
Just the aircraft itself, the Ford Trimotor, not necessarily this specific plane. What other innovative features did it have versus older aircraft, and what else did it do? I mean, you've given me some real specifics with this specific aircraft, but what else did the Ford Trimotor do for aviation?
Probably the biggest contribution to aviation was that this airplane is designed and built entirely out of aluminum. Prior airplanes had wooden wings, maybe steel tubing, fabric covering, materials that were a little more fragile, a little more prone to failure over time.
I think there was a lot of proof of concept taking place in here with all these new materials and the idea of reliable travel, moving people to and from. So though it might not be physical, there were a lot of ideas, there was a lot of paradigms that were started with the Ford Trimotor.
Because remember, back in the day there were no expressways, and it took maybe a month to go from East Coast to West Coast in a car, with how many breakdowns at slow speeds, on unimproved roads, things like that. With the invention of the Ford Trimotor, you could leave New York City, for example, on a train, and go to Columbus, Ohio in the morning, get onto a Ford Trimotor, and fly all day, and get on another train, travel that night, get on a different Ford Trimotor in the Mountain West, and fly into Los Angeles. It cut your time across the country significantly. It might be interesting to know that this airplane is rare. There's arguably 20 of them in museums around the world. There's arguably 6 or 7 that are flying, but there's only 1 or 2 that you can buy a ride in.
Yes.
It's extremely rare.
And we're proud and privileged to be able to bring it, to Bemidji and everywhere else. You go to these wonderful museums. We have one that's associated with this airplane, the Henry Ford in Dearborn, Michigan. You can see a beautiful Ford Trimotor there too. It's collecting dust. Here, we bring the history to you. You actually get to experience it, not just look at it. So that's one of the neat things, to bring that kind of history to people.
And the EAA in Oshkosh makes aviation available to everyone. Young people, old people, regardless of your level of interest or what type of aviation you're interested in. There's educational programs for young people. There are summer camps for young people to learn math, science, technology, just life values through aviation.
Yeah, we are the leaders in recreational aviation.
Seven.
John Jones. Oh, okay. That's my red phone. Okay, thanks, sir. No, it was you. Thank you for that. Great seat.
Okay, good. Do you have a ticket, sir?
Yeah. No, I'm flying it today.
Yes, I do. You get the right seat?
Looks like I did.
Which seat should I be in?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Okay. Pick an empty one.
At some point.
You're the big media, Monty.
Hey.
landing, I didn't even know we landed. And what I love the most is I was able to stop and get all my shots with a propeller, stop their in motion. It worked out great. Seeing all the cabling, you can see all the cabling in here moving back and forth as they were flying. So that was interesting.
Did you go over the lake, Monty?
Yeah, and then even to see a GPS strapped in the corner, that was kind of fun to see that too. Yeah.
The old and the new.
Yeah, well, then they're saying it's more for weather than it is for where we're going. Yeah.
Sure. Very cool. Watch your head, sir.
Watch your head, sir.
Monty, I'll get it for you.
Is flight 2 brief, full, book, anything?
We've got.
Guys, we're going to need you back here now, please. Stay away from the props. And we're going to get this gentleman in first. Okay. You can take cuts. Mark? I'm Mark.
Hi, Mark. I'm John. Welcome aboard.
Yeah, I'm Doug.
Hi, Doug.
We'll get you
We're going to give the noise, give the ticket to you.
Wait.
Okay. Here you go.
Okay. There you go.
Got
a ticket?
We did it wrong. Yeah. You just talked to the Mark. That was
okay.
He owns the Busy Aviation. And then he first got the company back in the 60s.
He'll be clicking your airplane more and more than me.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Hold that camera for you?
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Watch your head there.
I didn't feel like I was authorized.
what I do, Rob? I'll just take the bottle and put it over there.
Yep, that's what I was gonna do.
And then you can just be sort of the traffic cop if somebody's not doing what you don't like.
All right. Don't get too goddamn close.
Yep.
You're getting too close.
That's about it.
Yeah, you show my sign too.
Yeah, I had to try it out. How was that?
Farther stuff than I've ever been on a board.
Did you have a good time?
2 times up in the air.
Yeah, it was.
Good job there, Mark. We watched the flyer. Is that fun? You like it? Pull back, the houses get smaller, pull back some more, they get bigger.
Would you do it again, Mark?
Flying airplane.
Would you do it again?
Put one on the line?
A little heavy on the controls for aileron, but other than that, it feels really good. Yeah. Yeah, we should have one of those. I can see that right now.
Yeah.
On float.
Last year was the first year that we had anything here at the airport, and it actually wasn't us. We just assisted with the Commemorative Air Force out of St. Paul, and they've got World War II vintage airplanes such as the B-25 bomber you might have seen last year during the Water Carnival. And they're coming on Wednesday, so they'll be here with the Tri-Motor on Wednesday and doing their rides and flights throughout the rest of the week.
Say mustard.
Right over there at the grill, and if you'd like a little sauerkraut on there, we have some of that in the pan that's stewing up. Fine eats. Brought from Downtown Meats.
Wow, the best. Huh?
Exactly, they really are.
They are.
Beautiful sandwich.
Oh yeah. I love it. Yum.
And then a little tiny brat, I'm sure.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Legs off. Legs off. Legs up. Smiles everywhere.
Another rare bird that came in that day was this World War II Corsair. It did not give rise, but you had a chance to look the airplane over very carefully. One of the things that makes the aircraft unique is the wings fold up, because this aircraft was used on a carrier. I wasn't able to capture the full sequence of the wings folding, but you can see part of it in just a few minutes. Okay, this is the point. Now watch the wingtips start to come up, and they'll fold straight up, and then shortly we'll have an explanation of how this works by one of the local mechanics from Air Corps Aviation.
The reason the wings are folded up like that is that they were used on aircraft carriers.
Taxing or what?
No, they parked a Corsair at the high school.
Yeah.
There was an aviation class at the high school, and a group of boys were monkeying around with the airplane. One of them was in the cockpit and flicked on a switch, and the other one walked up to the propeller and pulled it through, and it fired, and it actually ran into the high school.
There was no climbing on the aircraft to look inside the cockpit, but at least you could walk around and take a look at this marvel of engineering. The pilots and mechanics know where to step. There are very specific places you can put your feet and put some weight on the aircraft without breaking or bending anything.
Yeah, the wing fold system on the Corsair, as you can see, lots of parts in it, really complicated. This cylinder runs a lock pin, so as the wing is folded down, it automatically pushes buttons on here, and the wing goes in, and there's a timing solenoid up front that runs the pin in. Fairly reliable system. There's adjustments, an adjuster bolt down in there with shims under it to set the position of the wing before the pin goes in. There's all this funny little linkage. All it does is closes the door on the top of the wing to cover the gap. So you can see a real complicated system for 1940s technology. The aileron system for the airplane is part of this. It's all on push rods, ball bearings, and bell cranks, so it moves really easily.
If for some reason I break down, I'm coming back, I'll call you.
Yes, the bell crank, there's two double bell cranks. There's one up here and one here, so when it's in position, they stand next to each other, and then it has a link rod that goes between them. So as the wing folds, it just bends on those two bearings.
If you push it with your hand, what happens to the...
So you can just wiggle it a little bit with your fingers.
Yeah, I can see it.
So the landing gear on the Corsair is kind of a unique gear. As it retracts, it folds aft and it rotates so that the outside of the wheel and tire face upwards in the landing gear well, so there's room to get the doors to close behind it. So the ingenious process that they decided on is they had a system of a collar around the tube with threads on it, and then at the top end they have a knuckle that's threaded into the wing on a 45-degree angle, so as you turn the strut, it rotates it for you. And then all of the linkage here is the lock system to lock the gear in position. So this lock is the down lock, so when the gear is down, it over centers, and it also, when you retract the landing gear, it folds and then it unfolds, and it is also the up lock. And this is one of the very, very few airplanes that I know of that uses the same lock to do the up and the down. Most have an individual system for each one.
So the reason that Bemidji Airport has a nice long 8,000-foot runway is that after World War II, the Navy built Bemidji Airport as a naval reserve base. And there were actually F-4U Corsairs based here in Bemidji in the late 40s and early 50s. The airplanes that were based here in the 1950s were part of Naval Air Station Minneapolis-St. Paul at Wold Chamberlain Airport. It's a big airport. And they had a Naval Reserve unit there. And they had 6 or 8 F-4U Corsairs assigned to Bemidji. And the reason that they were assigned here was that they would rotate Naval Reserve pilots from Minneapolis up to Bemidji for summer training and flying training. The reason they came to Bemidji was north of town there was a very large air-to-ground bomb and missile gunnery range
that the Navy used for practice. So they would rotate their pilots through to Bemidji and train in the airplanes. They didn't have a lot of airplanes here, maybe 6 or 8 that were normally flying, maybe a couple spares, but they were part of the bigger unit of Corsairs down in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So that's how Bemidji got its nice sized airport, because later on, after the Navy decided they were done with flying propeller airplanes and went to jets, they sold the Bemidji airport. They sold the Navy base to Bemidji, city of Bemidji, for $1. And that's how we got our wonderful airport here in northern Minnesota. An interesting thing, if you look out at these airplanes tied down in the grass, they're all facing with their tails to the northwest. And some research was done and found that those are the actual tie downs that they tied down the Corsairs over in the grass. There's a tie down on each wing, and then on the tail there's actually 2 tie downs, and that's, Eric, can you explain why that is the case?
So it's on a tailwheel airplane, when you tie down the tail, you want to tie it at 2 points because the tail can swing around really easily. On a nose wheel airplane, you can't swing that nose wheel sideways, right? So that's, on a tailwheel airplane, you actually want to tie it down at 4 points. And they put, of course, most people realize that northwest wind is the most predominant wind here in Bemidji. So they wanted the tails facing to the wind because it's hard for an airplane to fly backwards. It's easy for an airplane to fly forwards, right? So if you had a 60-mile-an-hour wind blowing directly at the front of the airplane, sitting on the ground, an airplane can fly, right? So if it's coming from the tail, the airplane won't necessarily fly on its own. So that's why they're facing the direction they are, where they're at. The guys at Bemidji Aviation just found them a few days ago. They knew they were out there. I don't know if Clark is still here, but I guess they went out there and picked a few, they located them. So they moved those airplanes out just recently.
We'll have to do it a different day. So I got told 2 different things. So up here in the nose, okay, the people that are going to be up front, the 3 that are up front, the person that's going to, who's going to be the 3rd person up front? Do you guys want to draw straws, or how do you want to do that? Anybody say, I want to go up front, nobody else cares? Okay? All right. So you're gonna be in the well seat on takeoff. Okay? After we get airborne, we get 1,000 feet, we'll say, okay, get out of your seats. You're going to be the first person that's going to go through this tunnel underneath the left pilot seat. That goes to the bombardier nose section. You can sit up there for 5 minutes, look through the Norden bomb sight. One thing that's unique about Miss Mitchell, it's the only B-25 out there that's flying that has top turret that works, tail turret works, Norden bomb sight works, all the shackles work. So we are capable of going out and dropping some stuff on people. So if you got somebody you don't like, let us know. We might take care of that for you.
Got a flour bag, drop it on my brother's house and fly over.
So when you go up through that crawl space, there's no seat up there, okay? When you're looking through the Norden bomb sight, just be careful, because if it's bumpy and rough up there, you might have your eyeball close to that thing and get whacked, so just kind of be careful of that. But you can look through there and see the sights. It's pretty awesome. Just leave the guns where they're at. Don't take them out of their tether and all that stuff. Just leave those fixed as they are. So when you're up there for 5 or 6 minutes, up there on the side of the right side, you'll see that silver box. Take your headset as soon as you get up there and plug in case we need to tell you something or you need to talk to us, we can communicate, okay? The silver box that I'm talking about that you people will be plugged into every station that you go to, if you need to talk to us, there's a little paddle switch. It's a little silver switch. You just turn it clockwise so it stops. Now you can communicate with us. You'll be able to hear us at all times without worrying about that paddle switch, but just turn all the way till it stops. So if you see something really goofy, if you're up in the nose, just say, hey, Eagle, 12 o'clock. By all means, let us know. Something emergency type, but for the most part, it's going to be a sterile cockpit or aircraft. We don't want you guys to talk during the flight unless absolutely you feel it's necessary, and then by all means, turn the switch and let it go. So when you come back from the tunnel, you're going to go up in the right seat, and the guy that was in the right seat will go through the tunnel, do his 5 or 6 minutes there. He'll come out, he'll take the top left seat, and then that guy will go through the tunnel. When he comes back out of the tunnel, he'll sit in the well seat for landing. Okay, is that all clear to everybody? Okay, any questions so far? Okay, the next thing we got to cover is we have an FAA exemption through, it's called a 6802 exemption. We are allowed to give rides on a military aircraft. They weren't designed to give rides for passengers like the airline business does. So we have to let you know that this isn't normal passenger operations. Jonica's a passenger airline pilot, so by all means, it's definitely nothing like that. So don't expect that. And the last thing I would say is, don't look at this as just another ride. You know, a lot of people say, hey, I'm going up for an airplane ride. Look at this as a historical, living what we call a history play. Just imagine yourself as being a 20, 21-year-old kid, which a lot of these guys did. Some of these guys just came off the cornfield. They only driven a tractor. 20 years old, a year later, they're flying combat in a B-25, B-17. So a lot of young kids flying aircraft. So kind of think about that stuff. When these guys were coming back from missions, like I said early on in the war, they were losing a lot of airplanes. They might have just had their buddy blown out of the sky, and then 2 days later they're flying another mission. So kind of think about those things when you're flying the flight, because they're getting attacked by fighters, flak, they're doing bombing missions, flying low level. So all those things kind of come into play during your flight, so just kind of think about that stuff. Any questions so far? Everybody understand what we're doing? Jim's the flight mechanic. He'll be in the back of the airplane with the 4 passengers. He'll get you situated. He'll kind of do your rotation, and we'll be good to go. We're going to go down towards the south end of the lake, fly over town, Green Mill and all that kind of stuff, and come back and land. So expect about a 25-minute flight, wheels up to touchdown, engine start, takeoff, taxi, come back and land. It's going to be about 35 minutes trip for you. So thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate your support, and we're ready to go.
Showed up.
If you were looking for souvenirs that day, there were items for adults and teenagers, including t-shirts, hats, jackets, model airplane, and even 50 cal ammunition. Of course, it was dummy, it wasn't for real. There was quite a selection, and while you're waiting for your ride or just looking at the airplanes, you can go inside the main terminal and see all these items for sale.
Yeah, they are, and they're the back ones.